Big industry news, NPR has had to cut 10% of its staff. 4 podcasts are now gone over at this nationwide media organization. I think that says a lot about the radio industry and left-wing media. You're listening to New England Take. I'm your host, AJ Kierstead. Be sure to check out the newenglandtake.com. And if you're watching this on YouTube, which you definitely should be doing, it is at New England Take. Like and subscribe. So 10%, that's a pretty big cut. So I'm going to go over and show what's going on with some of that over at the Vulture. The turbulent stretch for the audio world continues. National Public Radio, and that fundamental pillar in American news radio, and one of the biggest podcast publishers in the world, has moved to lay off 10% of its staff, or well over 100 employees over the past week, marking the organization's sharpest reduction in workforce since the 2008 economic crisis. And I think it says a lot about NPR's business model and just in general where the industry is going when it comes to podcasting and radio, and left-wing media is just... I don't think anyone knows the future still. We had it in our heads before that, it's just going to be straight up podcasts. Everyone's just going to go do that. Joe Rogan's the future and everything. I think the industry's a lot more complex than that. NPR went whole hog into the podcast realm when, especially around the 2016 election, leading up to that with the Politics podcast, which I actually listened to a fair bit. The problem is with NPR especially is they went into this weird realm of sort of opinion writing, but not really. I've had conversation with Anne-Marie Timmons over the New Hampshire Bulletin about this and her frustrations with the outlet. And so it's not just me as a right-winger, and it's kind of center-of-the-road reporters are even seeing the same thing, where you'll see an article and you go, is this opinion or is this news? Is this just a fun thing? It's very confusing. And when you talk about 10%, they're keeping all their broadcast shows. That's important to note there. So NHPR and such are not necessarily going to be affected by these cuts unless they happen to air the podcast as broadcast segments. They are going to be cutting like a lot of, I hate to say it, but get woke, go broke is the cliche term when it comes to this. They have gone so full bore into left-wing opinion that I can't see the national office as being a legitimate media outlet. I mean, they're the same as the Daily Beast, and NPR does not have that pedigree, in my opinion. Peter Boghossian has an amazing series on his YouTube channel I highly suggest you check out if you want to really know what I'm referring to, and he talks about like their supposed news program, and the way they only show one side of it, or you can tell the lens that they're looking through everything, and I really hate it. I mean, I don't understand that the trying to market yourself as honest journalism covering what's going on in the world when you're doing these sorts of things. And we're going to go back into Vulture. Vulture.com's reporting on this. To cap things off, the public radio mothership also announced it's halting production on 4 podcasts: Visibilia, Louder Than a Riot, Rough Translation, and the year-old podcast Wait, Don't Tell Me, which is their spin-off Everyone and Their Mom. Many hosts and staffers on those productions were also part of the layoffs. Among those affected by Louder Than a Riot staffers, just the names of the various hosts they have over there for that program. I don't understand the audience. If we go over to Everyone and Their Mom on their feed, I don't understand. Are they trying? NPR, generally speaking, is known for having kind of a Gen X boomer audience for the most part when you're listening to the radio. They have some younger people, definitely, but I'd say a lot of them are more activist-oriented. They're not necessarily looking for like the pop culture sort of things, which is what Everyone and Their Mom is supposed to be. It's like Everyone and Elvis, Everyone and Dolphins. It's their first show that has a millennial as one of their hosts over at NPR. And the person, I literally saw a tweet that said that I got fired today and it's the same day as my midterm, and how much that sucks. I feel for her and what she's going through with this, but I'm like, what's your audience? Like, I don't feel like they understand it. I was a big-time NPR politics follower. I listened to that show religiously straight through the 2016 election, and like the preceding year after that, I was still listening in, and slowly but surely, like, like, I don't understand what they're going for anymore, because they were constantly having these people make these comments and this sarcasm that I wasn't expecting to see, especially when it came to Trump and MAGA supporters. And going over, like, Invisibilia is another show that I feel a very similar thing, where, like, what exactly is your audience? How is this going to be successful commercially? It's like they have this scope of DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, as being this super important thing, but advertisers don't really care ultimately when it comes down to it. It's not widely sellable to advertisers or customers for connecting them. Like, when you check out a tech channel, I mean, there's all sorts of computer companies they're selling graphics cards and all sorts of things like that. When you're talking like a straight news agency, unfortunately, it's a lot of pharmaceutical industries, because it's kind of an older audience that are trying to get that. If you're talking podcast audio only, like, Squarespace is like a big thing you see on YouTube. Like, why would they do that? Raid Shadow Legends, like all these game channels and games that are available for mobile and such, like that. There's no real audience there for that. I mean, we're gonna sell some woke tampon commercials, like something like that. Like I don't think there's enough money to justify it. And when going over to Breitbart, actually surprisingly had one of the best reporting on this, because they actually listed a lot more things. That they went from 1,200 employees to 1,050 employees. Just they're not generating enough revenue. NPR, in this quoting from Breitbart, NPR, whose budget is subsidized nearly 11% by taxpayer funds, and that's a staggering $30 million budget shortfall. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry, honestly, to the staff that lost their jobs over there. But this comes down to poor management from above. There's no way you can get this far behind without management not knowing what they're doing. They did not make sure that they are producing content that they can actually keep their operation going. If you're not producing content that can get advertisers, if you need to keep the lights on, like a big organization like NPR that's very expensive to operate, well, guess what? It's going to shut down. And one of the other shows that was cut is internationally. Rough Translation is all international oriented. That's an expensive thing. Like, you can't just rely on apparently donations to do things like that. Their radio audience, I really don't believe in the national office, are the same people that are going to listen to the podcast. And if you can't monetize the podcast, you're hosed. And this is, I mean, listen to your local NPR outlet if you want, I guess. And I've had Dan Barrick of New Hampshire Public Radio on before. He's the news director. They do some pretty good reporting over there. I'm not a huge fan necessarily of the lens that they cover some of the things they do, but their Bear Brook podcast is great. I haven't checked out season 2 yet. I hope to get the host Jason Moon on someday to promote it, because I'm a huge fan of season 1. Like, there's investigative reporting that podcasts can do, but once again, I don't know how much money Bear Brook is able to really bring in to keep the lights on. What I'm doing with the New England Take is entirely just me paying out of pocket. This is not going to be a financially viable operation, except for me making enough money to just reimburse myself for a bit of the time and the infrastructure of keeping things going. And you got to go into it with that mindset if you're going to do that. Like Nancy West, when she started In Depth in New Hampshire as a nonprofit, she knew it was going to be nonprofit. She was hoping it would become viable but she does a ton of grant writing work. Like, there's a lot of groundwork that needs to happen in order to have an operation like that. And I really think the bosses over at National Public Radio have dropped the ball and screwed over a couple hundred of their own employees because of it. I'm not a fan of the national office. I think they're terrible, generally speaking. I think they're extraordinarily biased, but ultimately, I feel bad for the employees, once again, that have lost their jobs. I hope they're able to find other jobs out there, continue their shows independently, or rework them, because NPR probably owns the IP. Another big thing, if you're working for a big organization like that. I own the New England Take. I doubt the hosts of Invisibilia own Invisibilia, and they're going to have to start from scratch. All right, it's the New England Take. I'm your host, AJ Kirsa, thenewenglandtake.com. Please be sure to check that out. And at New England Take on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Give me a follow. Let me know what you think. And if you want to write for the show, or if you're a content creator looking for an outlet, please reach out to me at thenewenglandtake.com.